and welcome to the Crick Science Live Show. I'm Vali McDougall from Upcomes PR, also known as your science storyteller. And the Crick Science Live Show is where we aim to spark curiosity, raise awareness, and help enable access to science, technology, and innovation by featuring stories from those in STEM fields. So in today's program, we're chatting about sustainability and working to ensure a greener future for the Caribbean and the planet. Today is a special type of program for a few reasons. First, our topic is an ode to Earth Day, which is commemorated on April 22nd each year. And second, today we're also recognizing Girls in ICT Day, which will be celebrated on April 28th. And third, our program today features three guests who all have some things in common. So, first up, we have Dr. Legena Henry, who is a mechanical engineer and lecturer for renewable energy at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill. And so we're going to welcome Dr. Henry on now. Hello,
Hi,
Legena.
Vali. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on today. All right, so let me just get right into it. So your work is in the field of sustainable energy sources
Yeah.
in the Caribbean,
Yeah.
and you've honed in on sargassum seaweed. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually a team effort. This was me and my students and co-investigators at UE, and not just St. Augustine. The first time we disclosed this was in an IDB publication, and we actually
I
have
see.
co-authors in St. Augustine, co-authors at the IDB. So by no means this was a one-man show, a one-woman show. This was
Right.
a group effort. We actually started that summer looking at biofuel for Barbados because Barbados is on this path to being
Right.
100% fossil fuel free by 2030.
Wow.
And I remember in the classes we've had, I teach this course called Sustainable Energy Systems.
Mhm.
We spoke a lot about EVs when we started talking about transportation. We spoke about electric vehicles.
Mhm.
And the issue came up of, well, where does the power come from to power these electric vehicles now? And the answer to that right now in Barbados is heavy fuel oil. It's
Mhm.
not fossil fuel free. But also
Right.
the question came up of who buys electric cars? Electric cars are expensive.
Right.
And very few people in Barbados could pay for an electric car easily if the government just says, okay, fossil fuel free by
Mhm.
2030, no more internal combustion engines. So we set out to see how we could use these internal combustion engines with green fuel. And we started looking at the sugarcane. One of my students came at the time we realized sugarcane was not enough. We couldn't
Right.
we couldn't, I don't know, copy Brazil in Barbados for a number of reasons. And so one student came to me one day in my office and said, Dr. Henry, why don't we look at sargassum seaweed? I was just driving on the van going home,
Uh-huh.
passing the South Coast and see mountains of sargassum. Why don't we look at that as a resource? And I
Wow.
thought, wow, we spent the last few weeks looking at sugarcane. This girl just comes to talk about
Seaweed.
sargassum seaweed. But the thing is, she had so much passion in her face and in her
Uh-huh.
voice. The way she came to my office, out of breath, kind of thing. I just said, why kill this? Don't kill this. So I said, okay, go in the lab and do some work with sargassum and let's just see what happens by the end of the
Wow.
summer. And then that became the saving grace by
Wow.
the end of the summer because we realized a couple of weeks after that, while she started her experiments, that sugarcane was not going to be the answer for Barbados for biofuel to cover all
Wow.
the transport needs. So yeah, so that's the start of a very beautiful story, exciting story, which is now ongoing as
That
we make
that
steps
sounds
towards
really excellent. I
commercialization.
mean, I'm really glad that we even the idea dawned to go in that direction
Yeah,
because I mean there's so much of it, it seems, at
yeah,
times. Yeah. So what was the problem with the sugar cane? That a matter of amount?
yeah. The
Or
quantity and also the type of fuel. So Brazil uses sugarcane derived ethanol, and they mix
Mhm.
the gasoline with so they have different ethanol blends with gasoline. So no car, I mean, sorry, something like 3/4 of the energy used by road traffic in Brazil is powered by sugarcane.
Right.
Um, Brazil is massive compared to Barbados, obviously, but also their sugar industry is growing. Is on this is has been on the increase for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and part of it is just the ecosystem in Brazil of the sugar industry being so strong and rooted, and big factories, and our factory having the ability to say, today I'll produce sugar, today I'll produce
Oh,
energy.
wow.
So there's an ecosystem that supports road traffic being powered by sugarcane in Brazil, and many parts of that ecosystem are not present in Barbados. So
Right.
that's it. Also, they produce liquid fuels. We're saying you do a gaseous fuel, which will
Mhm.
have more energy yield. Liquid
Interesting.
fuels, you tend to have a low energy yield from your feedstock, but we're saying let's look at gas. So let's look at compressed natural gas. Basically the renewable version of CNG from the
Wow.
sargassum seaweed. So it's like a completely different solution from the Brazil solution. But that was where we started. We saw that as an example and thought, let's start here. And then we branched out into the CNG solution using biogas from
Wow. That's
sargassum
really
seaweed
great.
and from distillery wastewater.
That's really great. So now you talk about the fact that the seaweed fuel then can be used in regular vehicles or
Yeah.
vehicles that can take gas like CNG type systems. So how close would you say are we now, since you've started looking at it for Barbados, in seeing sargassum seaweed say at the gas pump for transportation?
Okay, so the another beautiful thing about this solution is none of the technologies is new technology.
Mhm.
All of it is tried, proven, tested, and works. So Trinidad is
Right.
a good example where you have tons and tons of cars that are regular cars, and somebody just installed a CNG kit. It takes 4 hours to get a
Right.
CNG kit installed, and boom, your car now drives on gasoline or CNG as needed. So
Mhm.
that technology already exists. So it's a matter of installing in cars in Barbados. The fuel, the our product of biofuel, we've had success in the lab, and we've had success not only in producing fuel in comparable amounts to what was presented by the
Mm.
government of Barbados from grasses, biofuel grasses. We also found ways in the lab to produce it in greater quantities and greater yields. So
Wow.
um,
Wow.
yeah, so we have the few we've run thousands of data points in terms of producing error bars on all the different recipes. But
Mm-hmm.
the next step now is the scale up, and so we have equipment where we're about to scale up to actually driving a car on sargassum, and that is when it the stage of permissions from the different regulatory bodies in Barbados
Mm-hmm.
towards driving my car, converting my car, and having that car drive around the country for a few
Mm-hmm.
months on sargassum. I guess to raise awareness, to raise visibility to the project, but also to demonstrate to
You're
funders
right.
that it
That
works.
would be that
Yeah,
would be a good thing to see for sure.
yeah,
So what you did mention electric vehicles earlier, and I know here in Trinidad that's something of a hot topic right now,
yeah.
about the possibility of electric vehicles to kind of help with our situation here with the amount of cars and so on. But um, I I do think though, do you see that the adoption of this type of alternative fuel is really the better answer than for the carbon, or it's like a dual answer of both things working together? And is it truly sustainable then? The use of say seaweed, is it more
Yeah,
sustainable or
okay. So I'm hearing two questions. So the first
yeah?
one I'll say is electric transportation, e-mobility is the direction. 4 decades, 5 decades from now, the whole transport sector in most countries will be electrified. That's a
Mhm.
fact. That's a given. it is the momentum that the big companies are going after, and we're in the Caribbean. It's probably impossible for us to say stop to the big giants. We have to say, what are the giants doing, and let's adapt to that. We buy our cars from Toyota and Honda and Ford and whoever, so we have to go by what they're doing, right? So that's one thing. However, the transition is not going to be as swift as a lot of people are trying to make it sound. So we actually at UE Cave Hill did a EV rollout strategy, electric vehicle rollout strategy for Barbados. And we think by 2030, you can't have more than 20% of road traffic electrified. And 2030, 20% would be like a massive achievement for a country like Barbados, because the electric grid needs to be upgraded. And then, like I said before, the cost is prohibitive. The cost of the electric vehicle, the cost of replacing the battery. Once you have the battery drops below a certain level, it can no longer drive a car. So those batteries are usually repurposed for other uses. So the practicality of it is less than 20% of road traffic will be electrified in Barbados by 2030.
I see.
And so we see about 3 decades of dealing with a world transition into electric vehicles, but also a country that needs to maintain road traffic without fossil fuels. And so we do think these are complementary solutions to have biofuels in
conjunction.
Yes, in conjunction with electric mobility.
Right. And so the other question that I kind of pushed in there too,
Sustainability. So is
yeah,
sargassum here to stay? Is there enough sargassum to drive road traffic? The answer is yes and yes. Based
really,
on what's being published in the academic literature on sargassum, we're seeing scientists at NASA, University of Maryland, FIU, different places producing evidence of what was the event that caused this big sargassum bloom in the Caribbean Sea. It has been a problem since around 2011 that we've seen it in great numbers on the beach, great volume. And that was caused by an event where oceanic behavior and atmospheric behavior combined with runoff from the Orinoco Delta in South America, from Brazil. All of these different factors came together to send this stable plume of sargassum into the Caribbean Sea, and that's not going to go away. But we do say one thing we're looking at is sustainable farming of sargassum. If we do see that the volumes start going down, if you get a transport sector depending on the presence of sargassum, well, we've already seen the proof that it could thrive in our waters. And so to sustainably farm it is a possibility and something that we are looking at. I have a PhD candidate now looking at making the sargassum supply sustainable and smart. One of the things is Barbados is 435 times more water than land.
Right.
And so
we have the water.
We have access to sargassum is actually much bigger than where we need to drive on the land. And so we don't want the solution to be worse than the problem. So we have to harvest it sustainably. But also we have strategies that we are looking at and studying to make it a sustainable supply when needed, if it becomes an issue, which right now there's no evidence that it will anytime soon be a shortage.
Right. Well, that's something I mean, that's excellent. I didn't even realize or even think about the issue of possibly farming it if the need comes to that, and doing it in a way that can just work into the system in a circular fashion. As that's just really interesting. So, I mean, with the conflict in Europe and the effect on fuel prices and so on, I mean, this does sound like an option to really take us forward.
Because it's a local substrate, so it completely cuts out. It largely cuts out the international environment from local energy security, which I think is beautiful. We're digesting sargassum seaweed in local rum distillery wastewater, and so those are 2 locally derived sources for this
Excellent.
product.
Really excellent. So, this idea of sustainability seems to be about us being more careful with our natural resources and using them in a way that doesn't threaten the future and or destroy the environment. So, and that applies to farming methods and how we produce our food, which brings me to our next guest. And she is Dr. Heidi Anna Jack, who is a livestock research scientist with an avid interest in sustainable and innovative feeding systems for tropical livestock. So I'm going to welcome Heidi now as to join us. All right. So yes, Dr. Jack, welcome. All
Thank
right.
you,
So
thank you.
thank you. So you're joining us, of course, with Dr. Henry here, and so I mentioned earlier the impact of that conflict with Russia and Ukraine and the effect on fuel prices, and it also affects feed prices. And here in Trinidad, we talk about the price of eggs going up because the cost of the feed went up, and so. In your field, and from your experience, can you tell us are there perhaps local untapped options for animal feed here in the Caribbean? You being a livestock scientist and with your research in that area, um, if you can tell us a little bit about what might some of the options be.
Yes,
Um,
definitely. There are a few alternative feeds to some of the commercial feeds that we normally. Basically, one of the real challenges in the sector, like the livestock sector, is the high dependence on these costly imported feed
mhm,
ingredients. And so basically my real interests and my area of research and my efforts go towards here's what lets us look in locally to see what
mhm,
materials we have locally that we could use as substitutes to these costly
absolutely.
concentrate feed imports. And so some of the options include things like our local forages, so that'll include grasses, our shrubs.
Mhm,
We can look into that. Even too, you have other alternative feeds like byproducts of crop production and agro processing. So those
mhm.
could be some of the options we could look into. I see a lot of literature on things like even root crops and some of the food crops that we could utilize some of the lower grade produce
I
as
see.
inputs, yeah, for developing feeds locally for livestock. So
Interesting. What about coconuts? Have we? I mean, I think I came across some work on coconuts. Seeing that way in the Caribbean, and there's a lot of coconuts around. Have you seen? I mean, of course, I know you've done some work.
right. Yeah. You have a lot of options with the coconuts. So for
Hmm.
instance, even things like the copra is high fiber and livestock species like ruminants, so sheep and goats and cattle, they need this kind of materials, high fiber materials to help with gut health and function.
Hmm.
Even in terms of things like the oil is high energy, and because of how energy dense this is, you could include as a part of diets for livestock. So, for instance, one of the major challenges with us is we have all these high protein forages like the trichantera and lucina and some of these other these tree type species, forage species, and they're good with proteins, but there's always that requirement for balance between protein and energy. They're known
I
to be
see.
low in the energy part of things. And so if you have stuff like we could utilize coconut oil, which is energy dense, and it could be used to build the energy content of some of these feeds. So you have a correct balance
Right.
of energy,
They're
protein,
mixing it together, and
supports the animals.
so the issue of sustainability we're talking about, and I'm looking at you mentioned the imported concentrated feed,
Right,
and I'm kind of associating that with a non-sustainable sort
right,
of
correct.
option
Yeah.
versus what we might be able to find locally. Is it really a issue of one not being as sustainable as the other?
Yes, correct. So again, as I would have mentioned earlier, the high cost of these fees, that's one thing.
Mhm.
Then also too, we find with it's crises like COVID, and we see the war in Russia, Ukraine war, and the impact on global supply chains and the movement of international goods. So
Yeah.
when you're heavily dependent on these materials that be in this the flow of them and the movement of them to our region, to our country, is being
Right.
disrupted by all. It's just like very unstable option. And so So the combination of cost and then just the how unreliable the supply is, the onus is on us to really look locally and really build our systems to produce feeds that are based on locally available materials. So
Right.
I think a big part of the strategy is not so much, one part of it is locating these materials, these alternative materials to the
Mm-hmm.
very unsustainable commercial concentrate feed imports, but also to is finding the structures and the technologies to really to really produce high yields of our locally available material, to secure the production of it, to secure the access of these
Right.
materials. So, for instance, one of the things I looked at in one of my recent research projects is forages and the fact that we could utilize forages. But when you look at forages, you have all these challenges where you have a disparity in the amount and the availability. So you have more
Right.
forage proliferation during the wet periods, that's
Mm-hmm.
the wet season, and then less in the dry season. And so one of the technologies I'm recommending is to apply forage conservation technologies like pelleting, forage pelleting, and forage cubes, which is pretty much is a conservation technology that allows us to store up these forages that proliferated heavily in
Interesting.
wet periods for use throughout the year.
Wow, wow. That is just interesting. So as you talk about options here, we spoke earlier with Dr. Henry about sargassum seaweed, and so I'm wondering, is there a way of using, or have has there been research into using sargassum seaweed byproducts in the byproduct that may come from that fuel process, that process of trying to get fuel to use in feed, perhaps, so that you can
Fees.
add that can be added. Is that something that's possible at all?
I do know of several trials and like scientists investigating the use of the sargassum itself as a
I
feeds
see.
input to as a alternative feed. However,
Mm.
with the high metal content and
Uh,
sometimes too you have other, I don't know, Dr. Henry may be able
contaminants
to
or
confirm, but yeah, you have other um, harmful chemicals that could be bioaccumulated in the sargassum.
I
And
see.
so the question is whether, yeah, is a matter of inclusion of the fresh forages. How do we include it that the animals
Hmm.
could benefit and is not detrimental to their health?
Right.
So yeah, so I know that's the area around at least fresh sargassum. I've seen a lot with that and utilizing that as a
Very
possible
interesting.
supplement, meat supplement.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Dr. Henry wanted to say something just now. I saw her mic came on.
Oh,
Is
I was just gonna say, we for our process we're using fresh sargassum straight into our systems, and um, that whole issue of the heavy metals and other things, we kind of bypass it because of the sequence of how we harvest and what we do. So I
mm-hmm.
think there's a lot of overlap and shared interest. And I think the more sectors that become interested in a serious way in harvesting sargassum,
Yeah.
all of us will benefit. So I would say, as we make progress with Inram and sargassum with the energy part of the equation, I think it could open up answers to the farming and the agriculture sector. I
Mm-hmm.
think is a case of the more people who benefit from the sustainable harvesting of sargassum, the better for any territory that's where that
Mm-hmm.
activity happens. And that I think to talk about sectors, the tourism sector will be more than happy that we're finding ways of mass
Using it.
harvesting. Yeah, so it's no
Yeah.
longer ending up on the beaches. So I
Really.
would say yes. I even in the energy space, I've heard people speak about the harmful metals and stuff associated with it. Yet for us, for our results and our output, we didn't see that problem
Much
in
of it.
our
Well,
experiments.
that's good to know. That's good to know. And even so, I did come across some work on it on using sargassum as fertilizer. So perhaps even if it can't feed the animals, maybe it can feed the plants that
Correct.
will feed the animals, kind of thing.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
so I mean,
Yeah, excellent for sure.
Mhm.
yeah, you do have
Because
a
what
point when
you're
you talk
doing
about.
is bringing nutrients that are in the ocean onto the land, and especially Barbados benefits from that. The soil in Barbados is not the soil in Trinidad. And
Right.
so to bring on its additional set of nutrients to the soil is to the benefits of Barbados. Barbados is
Mhm.
a coral island, and so it's a different
Soil type.
environment compared to
Hmm.
Trinidad environment. And so we see the scientific community in Barbados. We think that sargassum agriculture fertilizer is a good thing in general for Barbados.
Wow, very excellent. So, I mean, all of this ongoing work in sustainability, from finding renewable fuels to discovering better animal feed, I guess won't go that far without information and communications technology. And so, our next guest is an ICT infrastructure specialist who has used her background in computer science to support diverse initiatives in the Caribbean within industries such as earth observation, renewable energy, agriculture, and lots of areas. So her passion is really to contribute to the development of more sustainable technology systems in the region. And she is none other than Miss Ria Jack. And so we're going to put on now. Hello, Ria.
Hi, Vali. Thank you so much for having me on your Crick Crack series.
Thank you for joining. Oh, thank you for saying yes. Thank you. So, we really want to know now. So, that whole notion of more sustainable technology systems in the Caribbean, what that sounds promising and intriguing, and I just want to know what does that look like? What is that?
So technology is such a diverse field. You have your network infrastructure, you have your software as well, data, etc. And so if I think about more sustainable technology, I think the thing that I would probably focus on mostly would be data in particular, because data really, and when you analyze the data and you start seeing different trends and stuff over the years, then everybody talks about, you could understand where you are going to. You can try to course correct from where you came from as well. And so I feel like if the biggest thing for me, the thing I always think about with sustainability would definitely be data and how we harvest the data. And of course, in the Caribbean, we have an issue with different parts of data. So you have different sectors not having like open data policy.
Access.
So the access to the data, yes, it's sometimes hard to come by some of the data sets. And I think as a region, if we start looking into our policies for open data and just general data policies, I think then we'd have a much more sustainable information system.
And that's something I really didn't. We talk about open science or open data, open science, and even that. I know I've heard people talk about during the pandemic that it forced us to have to collaborate more and so on, and I didn't even think
Correct.
about technology and what that means for technology, and data. And you're right, you're absolutely right. That will help various sectors to develop.
Correct, exactly. Yes.
If they can get that. So that's really an excellent point. So I've read that of course ICT usually, I mean, thinking of ICT and what does it mean for a greener planet then, and they talk about ICT itself, though it's one of the users of CO2, that it can also help reduce CO2 emissions by developing smarter cities or transportation systems or electrical grids and so on. So you being a software developer at heart, as you describe yourself, what technologies have you found has the most potential then for our region in regard to doing that?
That's interesting. So there's so many things that I've interacted with. Something, if you look at even like something as simple as like augmented reality, if you bring that into our classrooms, then we can have a lot less. We can have a lot less of the like something as simple as like transport, like people could just use
Mhm.
your phone, and you could see,
Right.
like if you're doing work on like in agriculture, you're looking at, or even veterinary studies, you're looking at a cow or some other animal, you just pull it up, and people can use their phones and interact with the
Mhm.
diagram of the animal, etc. And so then it brings more interaction into the space. So but I think the thing that I feel, and maybe it's because I recently got into the field, but I
Mhm.
think the thing that I feel has the most potential for, in particular in the Caribbean, I feel it's Earth observation. I think
Yeah.
it's an area that we have not. I mean, there's a lot of work being done with it in the through the University of the West Indies. There's a lot of work
Mhm.
being done with the technology.
Mhm.
But I feel that we can use it a bit more for things like tracking something. Like I was in a project, and we had to track the extent in which climate change has impacted the south. I think it was the
Mhm.
southwest coast of Trinidad, and then we saw how you then saw that things like mangroves and such, the importance of
Yes.
developing mangroves in your coastlines. So we saw how much less the ocean was coming into the land, because there was the presence
Right.
of mangroves in the area, and it was just interesting to see that. So I think
Mhm.
even in terms of like our conservation of forests and such, we could use the
Yeah.
technology for things like that. I think also it's so much untapped potential with this particular technology. I think that the Caribbean as a whole really could use, and
Right.
I don't think we really tapped into the potential of it just yet.
Right. Actually, that brought to mind. I don't know if Dr. Henry wants to jump in here because I was actually going to say something
Yeah, I
about
was just gonna
sargassum.
say we are using that. So one
Yeah.
of my new PhD candidates, her project is basically we're partnering with the satellite observation people to track where sargassum is and to predict the
Mhm.
path, the drift paths of sargassum rafts. What we don't want to do is disturb deep water sargassum that is just out there in the deep water, not bothering anybody and does not plan to go on anybody's beach. That's good
Uh-huh.
sargassum, and we want to leave it in the ocean. The sargassum we want to harvest is the one that's on a drift path to the beaches. So our
Right.
beaches in Barbados, or a drift path to a beach outside our EEZ, like in Grenada or somewhere, those
Mhm.
ones we want
Yeah.
to anticipate and harvest. And so that requires working with the satellite people, the Earth observation people, and
Hmm.
we've already started that conversation, and that project is on underway now.
Yeah. It's so great to see how the different, I guess, research areas intersect, and how it really
Yeah, it's
feeds
true.
into each
For sure,
other.
yeah. Hmm.
Because I'm sitting here even thinking about what Heidi, what you said about the forage, the different forages, what you refer to it as those plants, and I'm thinking
Correct.
there must be some way of using technology to detect where they are coming about, and or where they might be, and then target them, and try to harvest them and plant more, and and
Yes.
predict that we're going to have more of that this season rather than the other season. And so I'm just thinking there's just so much potential for ICT in um, in these areas of building our sustainability. So very, very interesting. So Ria, so back
Yes.
to, oh, I don't know if Heidi, you wanted to say something there. Oh, okay. So yeah, but Ria, you are a girl in ICT, and it's coming up on ICT Day, Girls in ICT Day. What would you want to say, perhaps, to girls who are considering, or women who are considering careers in this field of ICT? I think this is a male-dominated field still, kind of. You tell
It
me if you
is. Oh boy, it is. It
is it?
is. We've still seen a lot more gents in the field than we are seeing women. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember a few years ago, I would have done I helped to plan a girls in ICT event. I remember coming out of that event. One of the things that, and it was younger kids, it was these kids were in secondary school. I believe they were in form 3. I think they were in Form 3.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things
Mm-hmm.
that they thought was that it is a challenging field. They feel that there's, and I think they feel that it was a challenge to be in the field. And then they also felt that there is, they didn't realize how much potential is in the field. Like, there, of course, as I said earlier, there are a bunch of different sectors in
Mm-hmm.
ICTs, and you can get into one of them, anyone that you want to, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, the thing that I would say to girls coming up, entering into the field, I would say
Mm-hmm.
that it's doable. Like, I mean, a lot of the time you probably have to spend a little bit more time trying to get past the initial shock
Yeah.
of some of the new things that you're learning. But it's not like, I mean, even if you spend like a 10, 15 minutes, it's just kind of really, looking into, like, if it's a piece of code or if it's some network design or whatever is the case. I
Mm-hmm.
think just spend the time looking at it and really understanding it. And it's not that difficult. It really is not. And
Wow.
then I'd also suggest that I think the thing for me that really caught my attention was, I remember a few years when I just started off with my studies. In fact, I was dragged into a Telus Code Jam event.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting in the room thinking, this is so scary. Like, why am I in here? All of these not big wigs, but, people who are really established in the sector.
Uh-huh.
I remember sitting down thinking, oh my gosh, why am I here? But funny enough, I feel like if at that event, I was really happy that I went, because at that event, that sort of sparked the curiosity in me for how some of these technologies can be applied in a real world
Right.
context and solve
Right.
some big problem for like a country, etc. And so
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting down in the room thinking, that was the thing that really sparked my curiosity. I remember thinking, okay, so then technology is really important. Like, there are so many ways that it could be applied in different contexts. Like, and so even for myself,
Mm-hmm.
as I started getting more and more comfortable and familiar with the
Mm-hmm.
sector, I was able to then start doing my own projects, recommending things like an augmented reality for environment, really, sorry, for the sunrise farmers in Guyana. And then,
Mm-hmm.
you just start thinking about the technology in real ways that it can be applied in real world context.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you build up to that place. And so my suggestion would be, for girls coming up, would be to try to get immersed in some context that will allow you to see the actual application.
Yeah.
Test the waters, there are different internships, a lot of internships around the country, like in
Right.
ministries and stuff, that they can get involved in, so that they can see
Mm-hmm.
the different parts of technology in the context of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that'll be
There's
my
so much.
advice to
Yeah,
girls
that's
coming
so
up.
much good stuff. That's good stuff because I'm even thinking about, the whole way that ICT can solve a day-to-day problem,
Yes.
that one may not even think about until they really realize, okay, there could be an app for that, or a game, or a
Yes.
mobile application. So, and I'm just even sitting here thinking just about the issue of transportation, commuting here in Trinidad and Tobago being so
Yes.
during rush hour, and having access on
Yes.
public transportation and all that. So it's just so much. As you're talking about, I'm realizing it, indeed there are so many things that it can apply to. So really, really good
Yes.
advice there. And so Dr. Henry and Dr. Jack, I don't know if you guys have something that you want to leave with, perhaps guys or girls coming up and who might be thinking of of a field in science similar to what you are in. Any advice or any tips for them?
Yeah, for me, I'll just say go through and pursue your dreams 100%. Don't allow fear and these things to cripple you from stepping out and getting out there. As Ria was saying, get out there, speak with people, get into context where you immerse and you understand the significance of the thing that you could bring to the table. And
Wow.
yeah, the only way you could really impact and really pass on resources if you really genuinely walk the journey and walk through a thing. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, just get in there 100% and engage fully. And yeah, I think all
Excellent.
will be well.
Excellent. And you, Dr. Henry, would you like
Yeah,
to
I
begin?
agree with both um, Heidi and Ria, what the kind of advice they gave. I think a big thing is sight.
Mm-hmm.
People might think is intimidating on the outside of STEM, which is science, technology, internet, and math. And I think people are calling it STEAM now and adding the
Yes.
arts into it. But it
Yeah.
could seem like an impenetrable fortress for all of these, I don't know, what's Big Bang Theory kind of personalities. But um, what I saw as a lecturer in STEM is when you show a student the power of their, well, that hard thing you learned last semester, this is how we could apply to a real life problem.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen GPAs turn around. Like I've seen people go from
Wow.
the dean's warning list to the dean's list, which is the other side of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
Just by seeing, oh wow, this is why we do fluid mechanics. You could solve this
Mhm.
question.
Yeah.
That spark actually turns around people's attitude to the work.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is it helps them to look inward and see there's a solution to some problem inside of me, and I could pursue that. And then the difficulty of the work takes a back seat, and the possibilities of the work become so much more visible that
Wow.
they push forward. So she said, Heidi's like, pursue, seek after it, get your feet in the water. And that's the way that you started to see these things. And I saw it with students where they're like, similar to how I said it's some of my co-inventors on this
Mm-hmm.
Raman Saga, something is students. And
Mm-hmm.
a big part of why students are part of that whole thing was to empower students. And it's girls. A lot of my students are girls. My
Wow.
co-inventors is four women and one man in terms of who are the named inventors on this solution.
Interesting.
And so I guess I see a lot of myself and what would have been doubts as an undergrad in STEM. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love to see a student kind of turn around and see the possibility of what is inside of them.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
encourage people, seek out mentors, seek out people who could believe in you
Yes.
and pour into
Mm-hmm.
you. And sometimes you might say, well, I really want to go into X, but I find Professor Y, she has a good attitude. She was supportive of me. She's doing topic B, but maybe I could start with her, and that would be a doorway in. A lot of the times it's about who are good mentors and building your career around that at the
That's
Right.
start,
true.
and just opening the doorway. I remember one professor in UE St. Augustine said to me, don't try to solve the world's problems in your PhD thesis. The PhD is just a door. It's just a door.
Just a
Mhm.
starting
And
point.
yeah.
Wow.
And so I would tell girls and young women looking at STEM as a field to approach, I would tell them, look for the doorway. The doorway might be a person who gave you plenty encouragement when you were struggling with one of your year one courses. A
Mm-hmm.
doorway might be one of your real bright classmates who somehow always took the time to help you walk you through a solution, and now
Mm-hmm.
they're working in company X. The doorway could be different things. The doorway might be, wow, I'm gifted in editing videos.
XYZ.
Let me
Mm-hmm.
go and edit some videos for the IME on that project. I could volunteer, and then boom, you make good contacts. So
Right.
find the doorways.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much, everyone. For you guys who are watching, now, if you haven't recognized the resemblance, all three, all three of our guests are sisters. So that's the third, very fascinating thing about today's program. So I'm really, really glad to have you guys. And
Thank you.
I just think, I wish you all the success in your various fields and endeavors
Thank
and
you.
onward to a
Thank you.
greener, cleaner planet,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and Caribbean region.
Absolutely.
yeah.
So thank you.
Yes.
And if you've enjoyed today's program and want to see more like it, do let us know and like and comment and share. You can find us on social media at Upcomes PR Or if you have a science story that you want us to tell, visit us at upcomespr.com or email upcomespr@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Darlene. Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.